Hi, all. I know you're working through your homework on syntax right now. Hopefully, you're getting it. If you're not, this is a great place to start. This is Syntactical Trees. I'll talk in this quick lecture about the basics of phrase structure and merge operations. In the next lecture, then I'll talk about move operations. So, the idea behind building tree structures is that we can hopefully describe the ways in which people build sentences, okay? So when we talk about building the actual tree structures, I want you to remember two things before we get started. That is, we're always going to start at the bottom of the tree. We're going to start with the words, assigning syntactical categories, and then we're going to start at the right and move right to left to assign phrase structure, building up as needed to include phrases in other phrases. So in this example, the book on the table, you notice we can identify each word by syntactical category, and then we can build up based on which words are heads, how those heads are either specified or complemented to create different phrases, so that ultimately the book on the table is one big noun phrase that includes a prepositional phrase and another noun phrase within it. Okay? And we're going to work on that in this lecture. So first, let's start with identifying syntactic categories. In other words, we're identifying words in a way that is useful for syntax. We have two basic big categories. Those are lexical and non-lexical. Lexical words are words that have meaning and words that can be inflected. We talked about inflection. We talked about morphology. And that includes nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and prepositions. Non-lexical words are words whose meaning is harder to define, words that have a grammatical function, and that includes words, determiners, auxiliary verbs, including modal and non-modal auxiliaries, degree words, and conjunctions. The important thing then to remember is that sentences are not formed by randomly stringing words together. Instead, they have a hierarchical design. That means it's in layers of importance, in which words are grouped together into even larger structural units called phrases and ultimately grouped together into sentences. So a phrase can consist of a single word, but more often than not consists of two or more words. Phrases have three potentially important components we want to pay attention to. Every phrase is built around a head, and that head has to be a core lexical word. That head determines the phrase type. So a noun phrase has a noun head, a verb phrase has a verb head, an adjective phrase has an adjective head, and a prepositional phrase has a prepositional head. And I'll note this here as well. We note heads in our tree structure. We do that by indicating the category, for example, N for noun, or V for verb, or A for adjective, or P for preposition, and follow that with a single quotation mark, which means head. Okay? Those syntactical phrases can also begin in English with specifiers. Specifiers are optional components that mark phrasal boundaries. In English, they always come before the head, and they mark the beginning of a phrase. Those can be determiners, adverbs, degree words. Complements are another optional component, and complements provide additional information. And in English, complements come after the head, marking the end of the phrase. So what we'll find as we combine or merge phrase structures is that sometimes other phrases are complements for heads in bigger phrases, okay? And that's why we talk about hierarchical, because as we merge things together, they're not equal anymore. They fall under other things, okay? Become parts of other heads, and we'll see that in our example. First thing to understand is that phrase structure, or the X-bar schema, is what is the way that this approach to syntax is organized, so that every phrase, as I mentioned, has a head, and that the complement is part of that head structure. But note that the specifier is not part of the head structure, but is part of the phrase. Okay, so you want to think about that as you're drawing your trees, but think about it more importantly as you think about the ways in which our language works as we build sentences. Okay, so just to make it clear, phrase structures are built around the heads, right? So a noun phrase has a noun head, a verb phrase has a verb head, an adjective phrase has an adjectival head, and a prepositional phrase has a prepositional head. But specifiers are also sometimes specific to different phrase structures. So with noun phrases, you may have determiners; with verb phrases, adverbs; with adjective and prepositional phrases, degree words. And remember, they can include complements. They don't necessarily have to, but they may. And our X schema shows the phrases and the words they contain, including the marked heads. Once again, you see there on the example that the head word is marked at the category level with that little single quotation mark, or an apostrophe, if you will. All right, so phrase structure samples. We're going to show you here how merge starts to work to put words and phrases together to create other phrases. So if we look at our noun phrase, a map of Maine, you should notice you have an individual word A, an individual word map, and we have already a phrase of Maine. So notice that of Maine is actually a prepositional phrase. We could break that down further because it contains a preposition of and a noun phrase with a noun head, Maine. In other words, this structure shows us how we can merge together not only individual words, but also phrases to create other phrases. So our noun phrase here merges a determiner, a noun head, and a prepositional phrase, which also includes another noun phrase. The same thing is true for each of these examples, right? The verb phrase quickly ate the bun. We have a verb phrase, right, built around the word ate, but the bun is a noun phrase within that, and quickly is an adverb within that, right? And the adjective phrase built around the adjective kind, very kind to others, right? Very specifies how kind is a degree word. And the prepositional phrase to others gives us the information about who someone is being very kind to, right? So, and then the last one, the prepositional phrase, you can see almost in the lead. Almost describes not quite in the lead, almost in the lead, right? But it's a specifier, it's a degree again. And then in is followed by the lead, which is a noun phrase. It's important to notice that prepositional phrases, prepositional heads, always must have a complement, and that complement will be a noun phrase. So how do we move from phrases then to sentences? Well, we keep building those phrases and words together until they form a sentence. A couple of things you should notice about sentences that are different than just the phrase level. Every sentence is a TP, or a tense phrase, and the T head is marker for tense, is the head of the whole sentence. That T head is marked as either past tense with plus PST or not past tense with a minus PST. So non-past would include, non-past includes our present and our future tense words and related modals. Every sentence can also be included in a CP shell structure, which will become more important when we talk about move in the next lecture, but it's important to notice that we have complementary phrase structures and that they are regular tense phrase can fall within that complementary phrase structure, which is also kind of, you can think about as a clausal phrase structure, which at this level would be minus Q for sentences that are not questions and plus Q for questions. Under move, the plus Q is replaced by the first auxiliary in the surface structure through inversion, but we'll talk about that in the next lecture, right? So note too that CP can occur within sentences as well to deal with embedded clauses. Okay, so clause phrases, right? A sentence is a clause in itself, but those complementary phrases can also be clauses within the sentence. Work from the bottom up and right to left, just like we did for phrases. You do that for clauses, you do that for sentences, okay? So we're going to look at an example here of a merge diagram. The children read a book. Ultimately, this is what it should look like, but how do we get there? So we start at the bottom, identifying the syntactic category of each word. So we always start right to left. So book is a noun, A is a determiner, read is a verb, children is a noun, D is a determiner. Then we start at the right and identify the heads and phrases working from the bottom, right? So noun, we know is going to be a noun head because noun phrases, right? And what's the A there is a determiner. A determiner is a typical specifier for a noun phrase. So together, A and book form a noun phrase, a book. Remember that the specifier is not part of the noun head, but if we had a complement of book, it would be part of that noun head because complements are part of the head structure that they complement. Okay? Now, we notice our verb read, and read is obviously going to be our verb head, but a book complements read by telling us what the children read, right? Well, the children read a book, right? So, that noun phrase, a book, along with the verb read, is your verb head, which creates a verb phrase. Separate from that, we have so that would be like our predicate of our sentence, if you want to think about traditional grammar, right? In traditional grammar, we also have a subject of our sentence, right? And in this case, we have the children, which operates very much like a book, to create a noun phrase. But we're not done yet, right? The next thing we have to do is include the tense head, mark our tense, and include our tense phrase structure, okay? So you'll see we already worked up to the noun phrase and verb phrase, the children, and read a book. Read a book, then, read is in past, so our tense head is going to be made up of our tense plus past and our verb phrase, read a book. And that is connected to our entire tense phrase for the sentence, which puts our subject with our predicate, the children read a book. And when you do it all pretty like, it looks like this. Now you'll notice here we put it even inside the CP, or the clause phrase, the complementary phrase, which includes our complementary structure, that it is not a question. In other words, we know it's a declarative sentence. And then contains the sentence structure over here. Now, if you remember to work your way up through the tree structure, you will note how phrases combine to form other phrases when they act as complements. The easiest example is a prepositional phrase, which I mentioned, requires a noun phrase as its complement. For example, on the table. It is important to note, too, that there is no limit to the number of complements a phrase can contain. So as we build our tree, we need to include the complementary phrases together with the phrases they complement. So, for example, opened the door for Andy with my spare key is one big verb phrase, right, with our verb head opened. But it includes two prepositional phrases, four noun phrases, and an adjective phrase. See if you can see all those. Two prepositional phrases, for Andy, with my spare key. Four noun phrases, the door, Andy, my spare key, and my. You might have missed my there. My is its own single word noun phrase. And an adjective phrase for the word spare. Note, too, that a clause may be a complement, which means that a CP and a TP occur within the main CP and TP structure. So let's look at one of those. And what we did here, we put the children read a book that I like. We added that I like to the end. That I like, you'll notice, is not a phrase but a clause because it contains a subject and a verb, I like. In other words, it has an embedded clause in it. And that embedded clause, right, we have like is a verb, I is a noun, and that is our complementary word. It allows us to connect or embed this sentence as a complement of book, okay? We work our way up then. We know that our verb like is our verb head. There's a verb phrase that is not past. It's in present tense, right? And that its subject is I, which is a noun, noun head, noun phrase that connects together in this sentence, I like, which is inside the clause, that I like, which is a complement of the noun head book. Which book? The one that I like, right? Which together with a is a noun phrase. And all of that is complementary to read. Read a book that I like is all a giant verb phrase that is in past tense and that together with the children makes up a sentence. Questions? Contact me. I'm here to help.